Before we begin, we would also like to thank the National Science Foundation, Office of Polar Programs, for their financial support to ARCUS and this seminar series. Now, I'd like to introduce our speaker. Vera Kuklina is an Indigenous scholar born and raised in a Buryat village in Siberia. Vera is a research professor at the Department of Geography at the George Washington University. Her research interests include urbanization of Indigenous people, traditional land use, socio-ecological systems, cultural geographies of infrastructure, and remoteness. Her research is based in field studies and collaborations with local and indigenous communities in the Baikal region, Republic of Sakha, Yakutia, Northern Mongolia, and Alaska. Dr. Kuklina leads, co-leads, and participates in Arctic in the research projects funded by the National Science Foundation and Research Council of Norway. She also co-leads an Arts Links initiative focused on convergence of science, arts, and place-based local and indigenous knowledge system. Vera is the author of about 80 publications, including papers in Arctic science, environmental research letters, polar science, polar record, and geoform. Welcome, and thank you for joining us, Vera.
Thank you, Kuba, for a nice introduction, and thank you, organizers, for hosting me. And also thank you for joining us today during this time when you can have an option to have lunch, join other webinars, or just listen to me. I appreciate it. And now I will start sharing my screen. Oops. Okay, so today I will be talking about what Arctic science can learn from studies of informal roads in Siberian Taiga, and will give you just a brief overview of my presentation. First, I'm talking about why this topic is important, and then give a list of methods and data that were utilized in our research, and show some results that can be relevant for other Arctic communities and for other Arctic studies, and conclude with some future research and possibilities for developing this topic. So, roads as agents of change are now a very popular topic amongst the anthropologists and social scientists who focus on infrastructure and its role in social relations. For me, it's also relations with my grandmother, who was living in a small Buryat village 30 kilometers from the Trans-Siberian Railroad. She was born in 1906, and she was able to witness all dramatic changes that railroad constructions brought to the village, to community, and to our cultures. So here I give you the map created by historians Ivan Sablin and Maria Savelyeва, showing map of Siberia in the early 1900s when my grandmother was born. As you can see, red color is Russian population, and it was mostly located in the south and west of Siberia, but also it's along the Trans-Siberian Road. And here was my village. Here is my village. It's a Buryat area covered with dark red. During the 20th century, this map has changed, and in 1980s, when we had the largest population of Russians in Siberia, we still can see that most of the territory is settled by indigenous communities. And after 1980s, during the collapse of Soviet Union, many Russians left Siberia, moved back to European part of Russia, and here it's on the height of Russian had much smaller area for Buryat people, and here is my village that is very, very small portion settled by Buryats, and For other ethnic communities, it was also significant change, light purple color, and later I will talk more about Evenki communities. So, and why I focus on Siberian Taiga, although I was born in the forest steppe region, for me, the Siberian Taiga was always considered as remote place, and it's considered as remote and roadless for other researchers who study, for example, roadless area patches, and they were with dark blue, Siberia, think that there is a hope to preserve biodiversity and important ecosystem services for the whole planet. But we find that there are plenty of different roads, and they are remaining informal. And why informal? There are different opinions why it's there is this phenomenon. First, researcher who introduced the term informal roads was Charles Trumbull, anthropologist, and he was distinguishing formal roads because they are controlled, they are planned, and they are more straight lines than informal roads that, for his opinion, have only local significance. And then James Scott further developed idea of these informal roads, and he thinks that state just didn't have enough resources to control and formalize relations. And in his book, he's talking about Zomia in Southeast Asia, where people are able to be beyond the state control, living their traditional lives, because there is rugged terrain and marshlands that protect them. And finally, maybe state just choose to ignore these informal roads, as is shown on example of fragmentation in Brazilian Amazonian forest, researched by geographers who see how these networks of informal roads are spreading very significantly on the territories of indigenous people. So whatever is the reason, we study in our project what are the environmental, social, economic, and cultural implications for the development, maintenance, and usage of informal roads, and what is the impact of these roads on sustainability of remote communities. And based on these questions, we formulated our objectives. First, we want to map these roads, then create a database, and then see what are the spatial and temporal road usage patterns for different social groups, and then study what is the impact on communities and environment. So our partner community is Evenki, as I already mentioned. It's Tungu-speaking indigenous group, the population of which is 38,000 according to census in Russia, and then there are over 30,000 in China. So they are very close relatives with Manchurians, and that also can make some implications for why China considers Siberia part of China. And here you can see the map showing the distribution in Siberia, very large, but if you look at the percentage, it's very small percentage in different regions of Siberia. So our study area is located in, as I already mentioned, Siberian boreal taiga, and it has a lot of similarities with interior Alaska and continental subarctic Canada. So low temperatures, long winter, and impossible to grow agriculture sustainably, then very low precipitation and discontinuous permafrost. All these effects how people live and why these areas are still remaining remote. So, and also it's region of very rapid industrial development. So you can see there is Power of Siberia gas pipeline under construction. There is East Siberia Pacific Ocean oil pipeline, and then Baikal main line that crosses the region and also provides access to resources and to Asian markets. So what data and methods were used? First of all, as a geographer, I rely heavily on field studies, conducting interviews, mobile methods, and participatory mapping. What it means that we try to talk to communities not only in their homes, but also we travel together, because then they have opportunity not only to talk, but also to show landscapes and roads that we are discussing. And then most of our interviewees are hunters, usually very good with maps. They have maps at home, and it's possible to discuss where exactly what is happening and then map it together. And then also we were bringing back our maps to show if they have any feedback and any corrections that we should make. So during research, we also geotag all our observations. Here you can see the route of our field work, one here. And as everywhere in the Arctic, you can notice that there are a lot of problems with organizing field work. And for example, here I just made a table showing not only how many interviews we gathered and which places we visited, but also why we couldn't visit other places. For example, in 2019, there were wildfires that prevented us from going to Tokma and Skut region, and then in Kholodny, we also couldn't travel far away. In 2020, because of COVID lockdown, right in the March, I had to go back to US before the borders were closed. And in 2021, again, wildfires. And when we were traveling in Kholodny region, our van got broken, so we also had to turn back. And then we also use a lot of satellite and aerial images, and I think especially for social scientists, it's a very good source of information, and it's good if you are interested in infrastructure and want to trace social relations, because you can see how it is materialized on the maps. And there are different sources. We used Corona images. It's declassified military photos from 1960s and 1970s that gave us opportunity to see changes over decades. Then Landsat and Sentinel-2 images that are available open access. It's possible to see dynamics, but only major roads are visible. Then we had an opportunity to use GeoEye and WorldView images. They are available through Polar Geospatial Center, and if you have projects supported by National Science Foundation or other government funded projects, you can get them for free and study all variety of infrastructure. But they are available only since 2002. Then we used MODIS and VIIRS for detection of thermal anomalies. It means that studies of wildfires, but resolution was very low. And also we had drone images. It's very, very detailed, but such a large amount of data, and you really need technical skills and good computing to be able to process all this data. This is one of the images. So what results we had after all this work? For objective first, to identify the roads, we can say that it's very important to look at the seasonal differences. For example, in summer, there will be very few roads, because in wintertime, when the lake is frozen, where marshlands is frozen, people have more opportunities to travel around. Then here is our map of digitized roads, showing how dense it is in across Tokma area and Vershina Khandy, very few in Severo-Baikalsky rayon. But yeah, later we went even in more details and started to work on the database, objective 2, and tried to make classification of transportation infrastructure. So we distinguished by the levels, federal, regional, local, and then informal. And these roads also can be formal, then semi-formal and informal, because what it means, formal, it's what you are familiar with, regular roads that you usually use, and then private will be those that have been for major infrastructure like pipelines or some private service roads. But it's getting more complicated with semi-formal, because these roads may be for special use, and they may be rented from the government or state-owned, but they are used also for other purposes, which makes them semi-formal. And then informal roads, we list abandoned roads that are still utilized by communities and outsiders, then geophysical or seismic line clearings, tracks and trails for subsistence, and even unofficial intersettlement roads that is widely used but remains absent on the maps. So a little bit more about these different types of roads. Seismic line clearings, they in 1980s were presented by long lines. You can see them stretching over many kilometers, and hunters were accustomed to use them even in the 1980s as soon as they got motorized vehicles. But since 2014, we see this dense network of seismic lines that go every 150 meters, 300 meters. They have 4-6 meters width, but affect significant areas. And then forest roads. Sometimes they utilize these seismic lines, sometimes public roads, but also they create these dendritic networks to get to forest patches, to clear them, and then to pile this wood across bigger roads to haul it during winter time. And then oil and service roads, they are very clearly visible. They have some little nodes from where they go in different directions. Usually they have very good quality and very distinguishable on the images. And then subsistence roads, they are dependent on relief, very spontaneous, hardly visible, and have various widths. So for objective 3, we try to distinguish which social groups exist in the study areas and what patterns of informal roads creation and use they have. And we have a lot of different actors in this field. First of all, municipalities. We see that there is a significant study area, and the significant areas is located as territories of Evenki traditional land use, but usually it's only on paper, and we can see that major pipelines that I already mentioned is Siberia Pacific Ocean and power of Siberia as they cross these territories, and oil and gas service roads owned by Irkutsk Oil Company and Gazprom, forest roads. These forestry companies very often change their names, so currently I think it's OMFAO. And then we have seismic line clearings, usually conducted by subcontractors like Geotech or Gazprom subcontractors. They may have restrictions on access, especially if we talk about oil and gas service roads, or if we talk about forest roads, they have some restrictions, but usually it is available for access to outsiders. And a little example how this network, road network development is related to population change. One example of Vershina Khandy before the Baikal mainline construction, there was no urban population in 1970s, and then millions of immigrants came from western parts of Russia and Soviet Union, and we see 20,000 in 1979, almost 30,000 in 1989. And then it's not only by railroad construction, but also discovery of Kavyktinskaya gas condensate deposit, and then development of forestry industries. So not many people left after collapse of Soviet Union. So still some population here, but in 2014, for example, when they started to construct power of Siberia pipeline, we see that there is no increase in population. And the reason is that currently most of these extractive industries are relying on shift workers. And I will talk a little bit about it later. So what the effect it had on communities. Now we have thousands of oil workers, hundreds of forestry workers, geology workers, dozens of tourists coming to the region because it's more available due to informal road network development. And here our colleague has created a map showing how the accessibility changed over time. You can read about it in our published paper, but you can see that the changes were dramatic. And changes were not only at that large scale, but also on the level of dwelling. For example, our community in Vershina Khandy has their village, and they have summer camp, they have winter camp, and traditionally they would go to summer camp during summer to fish, winter to fish, but then on another lake. And currently they often see that some gas workers or geologists stay in their camps. Sometimes some fishermen come and stay there, and maybe they are causing some disturbances like fires and everything, but that I will be also talking a little bit later. So yeah, impact. What impact it all has on communities. I already started to talk about fishermen, and in Tokma area they are also visible on the satellite images, and communities complain about such significant influx of fishermen, and they deplete local fishery resources. And as they try to, or community try to appeal to court, to different protecting agencies, but with no results. There is also significant impact on permafrost processes. Here my colleagues tried to look what exactly is happening with landscapes on permafrost, and they see that 93% of roads in Tokma area and 79% in Khanda area lay over the areas with potential permafrost processes, and that it may lead to many different disturbances like thermocars, and then there will be subfluction, frost heaves, so very significant changes that will affect access to subsistence resources, but also the subsistence landscapes themselves. And another example of effect on landscapes is shown on example of the road from Vershina Khandy to Magistralny, and it shows that it depends very significantly on the surface. If there is paving, there will be less impact even in the permafrost areas. But if there is just a dirt road, there will be waterlogging, multiple tracks, and erosion caused by informal road utilization. And in our interviews, we had a lot of concerns related to wildfires. Communities said that it the one of major impacts of informal roads is increase in wildfires. So together with my colleagues, we tried to calculate what is the relation between wildfires and informal roads. And we found that most of the wildfires happening within 300 meters distance from the roads. And also it depends on which kinds of roads there are. If it is geological, seismic climate clearings, there will be more probability of wildfires. But if it's oil and service gas roads, it will be less because usually they are heavily monitored. And for example, here you can see that there are small patches of wildfires, but usually they just stop these fires at the beginning, so it will not spread too much. And with climate change, we know that everywhere we have wildfires, and they affect large territories. And in our communities, we see that it's also impact of climate change, but informal road networks, they exacerbate this impact by even more effect on landscapes, and that there is almost like here, for example, peatlands that are drying because of climate change. They are burning. Almost half of peatlands have been burned in Tokma area between 2013 and 2019. Very large forest areas, woodland areas are burned. And the burnt areas, they are increasing significantly. Before it was the wildfires were normal phenomenon happening once in a while, and now they are happening so often that landscapes are not able to restore. And so a lot of problems. So to mobilize these different perspectives, we not only use our scholarly methods, we started collaboration with artists, and in 2021, Stanislav Podusenko traveled together with us to the communities, and he was able to document from his perspective, and created an exhibition, Red Taiga. And what is interesting for him, these landscapes were reminding about inhabitable Martian landscape, because it was all with smoke from wildfires, red dust, and all this taiga degradation and destruction caused by human activities. And I find it very important to amplify our own findings and community concerns using artistic methods. And here he explored palimpsest, that everybody has different perspective from the same region. Somebody see it as a place of extraction, for somebody it's just tourism, somebody lives here and consider it as a home, and somebody use it for traditional land use, and some people consider it as just a forest. So this year we increased our collaboration with artists and participated in Arctic Infrascapes exhibition, where not only Stas Podusenko showed his photos, but also we had performance by Zosia Liutina, who was exploring the village of Tokma covered by smoke, because smoke prevents communities from travel by helicopter, the traditional way of transportation. And artist Olga Lo created an installation about zombie fires, which is a very new phenomenon for our communities, and it's subject of big concerns. And we know that it's a significant phenomenon in the whole Arctic, and in the future it would be important to pay more attention to local communities' observations and to increase visibility of these zombie fires and other problems in taiga using artistic methods. So here is a little bit film. I don't know if we have enough time, but we can I can show the fragment of this film. So this is the village of Dogma that I was talking about. And Natalia
Residents of the small taiga village of Tokma learned about the proximity of forest fires from thick and acrid smoke and the ash that covered all surfaces, including snow. The rate of combustion is high during an intense fire. Therefore, leaves, needles, and other light particles burn out instantly, preserving the fragile shape of the burnt organic matter. These remains rise up with hot air streams and are carried away by the wind. The locals determined what type of vegetation was burning by the shape of the remains. The ash was in the form of needles, dwarf birch leaves, etc. The residents' knowledge of the vegetation and the woods helped to roughly identify the fire's distance.
We have not seen this much snow in the last 45 years. When we ran last time, it was wild and scary. The entire forest was on fire. It was hard to breathe. The chance of ash will fall from the sky.
Okay, so you can watch it, the whole movie on YouTube if you have time. And here are some of my conclusions. So I just want to summarize that our studies of informal roads are very important for understanding materiality of social relations, but then it also leads to environmental consequences that in turn will affect our social relations again. It's very important to rely on local and indigenous knowledge for formulation for formulating very specific questions, and these questions may have global significance. So, and we find it very important to combine our field methods with remote sensing, especially when we don't have access to field work anymore. And it will help to understand specific phenomena. And it has broader implications, considering local and indigenous communities as experts and working with artists for amplifying our messages and for co-creating emotionally driven products, and also for keeping extractive companies and authorities accountable for what is happening in our remote communities. So thank you. And here is the whole list of people who contributed to this project. I especially thank National Science Foundation for support, our local indigenous partners. So we have social scientists, local indigenous knowledge experts, landscape studies, land cover and use change, cartography, road digitization, art-based research, and synthesis of knowledge. So you will have access to this recording later, and are welcome to ask any questions in the future.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you, Vera. That was a great presentation. I really, really enjoyed that. And it sounded like a very complicated project that came together really nicely. As a quick note, just like Vera was saying, the entire presentation today is being recorded. It's going to be archived to view later at your convenience. So we're now going to begin the question and answer session. As a reminder, if you're joining by Zoom, you may raise your hand and I will call on you, or you may type your questions into the chat window and I will read them aloud. If you're joining by phone today, you'll need to raise your hand by pressing *9 to ask your question aloud, and unmute yourself by pressing *6. If needed, depending on time, Vera has offered to continue to be available for another 5 to 10 minutes after the top of the hour. And just to get us started here today, I do have a question for you. Do you have any future plans for this project?
Currently, we continue our project in Mongolia, which also has a wide network of informal roads, and we have already visited communities 2 times and hope that next year we will be able to bring some results and discuss opportunities for future development of the project. And of course, yeah, we still keep connections with our colleagues in Russia. And as I mentioned, Siberia is mostly a region populated and centered by and called home for Indigenous people. And I think it's important to keep our connection with them.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. We have a question from the chat from a little bit earlier in the presentation from Muhammad. I'm just going to go ahead and read it out loud. And if Muhammad wants to unmute and have any clarifying questions or anything like that, that could work as well. But the question is it possible to get a survey while using GIS with X-ray scooping? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I will forward it to my colleagues who are remote sensing and cartography specialists, and my expertise in social science.
Perfect. Thank you, Vera. Wonderful. All right. And we just had a question come in from Dylan in the chat. Could you explain more about how you used art to increase understanding?
I think it's very visible that our pictures, our photos are different from photos that Stas Podosenko was taking, because his view was more precise and much better, and it enhanced our understanding. And I in particular never thought about Taiga as Martian landscape, and in collaboration with him, it was important to consider this question in the broader context, what we are doing with Taiga, with all these extractive activities. And I think it was very helpful to understand that it is related to this global question of extractive industries and climate change, how it can make our planet inhabitable as Mars.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for the question, and thank you for the answer. I have a question that just came in here from Lisa. Were there historical cultural burning practices by Indigenous peoples in these areas to control and prevent large wildfires, like is found in the US, lower 48? Are controlled burns used in fire management at all?
I know that they were used in my community, Buryat, for improving pasture lands, and I know that Sakha people use it for their pasture lands as well, but we haven't discussed it with Evenki communities. Looks like I may be wrong, but at least it was not part of the discussions.
Thank you very much. And while we kind of give a chance for anybody who's looking to ask a question and put that in the chat or raise their hand, I had a quick one. If you know, for after doing this project, if you were to do it again, is there anything that you would change in your processes or in the way that you approached this kind of project?
No, I think there are a lot of things that I would do different. I would rely more on communities to discuss all these questions even before the projects have started, even before it was submitted for funding, because then it would be much more focused on the specific questions. And then during the project, I had to learn so many GIS and other skills that if I had them before, it would be much easier and more productive to have this research done.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And we have a comment here from Alexander that is along the lines of something I was thinking as well. Thank you, Vera, for your presentation. Please come to Alaska. We have a lot of similarities here for your research. And I'll just add on a little bit to that question. Do you think there's a lot of similar potential for a similar kind of work here in Alaska?
I would love to. Thank you for invitation. In fact, I should have mentioned that we have the project Frozen Commons, and it was inspired by the results of this project. And we really started to think about comparative research of interior Alaska and Sakha communities. And as I already mentioned, permafrost, snow, and ice are very important for our Arctic communities, and we want to see what exactly is the value of this frozen matter for communities and how they manage it during this time of climate change, and what we can bring with our comparative research to benefit both communities. Currently not Sakha, unfortunately, but Mongolian again.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And I see a few more comments inviting you to Alaska, which is wonderful. We'd love to have you.
Thank you.
And another question here from Jessica. Is there data on how used the roads are and the correlation between road traffic and wildfires? Or is that something that you looked at?
Yeah, we were thinking about how to distinguish the roads that are used from those that are not in use anymore, and it was very difficult. And but only through the studies of changes we can say that these roads are already getting forest grows back in those roads, but if the road is very recent, it's very difficult to say how heavily it's used. Unfortunately, with satellite images, it looks like for now there is no such opportunity. And we tried to make this analysis of proximities of fire ignition, how often it happens near the roads, and I have shown that quite often most of these ignitions happened near the roads. Although we know that lightning is very important source of ignition in the Arctic, in our region looks like roads and users and those who travel by those roads are main sources of wildfires.
Wonderful. Thank you for your question here. And I see next a question from Jeff. I'm interested in the methods of construction of informal roads. Are they typically simply clearing, or is there material imported from a material source to build the roadway up?
We have this wide variety of informal roads. I showed pictures. Sometimes it's just trails that became widely used by vehicles. But for example, when we talk about oil and gas service roads, they can be paved not only by gravel, but sometimes with asphalt. And they still will be informal because nobody gives this information where this road is located and who can use it. And usually it's only oil company can use it, but then they have some exceptions for local users. And then it's the whole process of negotiations, which remains informal, unfortunately. And that's why I'm talking that it's important to map these roads to show where they are existing, and that to discuss what will be potential impact, because there is always impact, and how to mitigate this impact.
Thank you, Vera. And we have a question from Kana here. Our region in Alaska is considering building a private road across a similar landscape to facilitate mining. This road will be the first point of drivable access between urban areas of Alaska and rural villages that are currently off the road system. what are some learning lessons or cautions that decision makers here might need to hear from this road in Siberia? In particular, I've heard of some correlation between this type of access and influx of mining workers and missing and murdered Indigenous women, plus issues and other violences. Did communities discuss such issues? Is that something that you came across in your research?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And in fact, that was also very important for me. I think it's important to show that there is always a claim that road will be affecting only this little patch in the forest, and there will be no impact on any. There will be some poachers coming, some recreational tourists, and there will be a lot of people and a lot of noise. And even when the road is abandoned, it's continued to be used by those who were not taken into account when a company was building that road. And I think it's very important to make sure that all these different negative consequences are discussed with communities. And especially, yes, we know that, and I know from my grandmother's experience that influx of outsiders creates a lot of violence and creates loss of culture. So it's also not usually considered when somebody promises that they will mitigate impact.
Thank you, Vera, and thank you, Kana, for that question. I want to leave just a little bit of space for any follow-up questions, or if anybody else has anything that they'd like to ask about. Feel free to either raise your hand over Zoom or put something here in the chat. We have a couple minutes officially, but if there's no more questions or answers, then we can also move to kind of wrapping up the webinar here too. And I guess in the meantime, as those come in, and if those come in, I'll just ask Vera if there's anything else you'd like to talk about with about your other research or any other work that kind of connects to this one, any other projects that you have on your horizon.
Yeah, I have several projects, and for Alaska community, probably I would like to highlight that we have studies of urban green spaces in Fairbanks, and my student Diana Khaziahmedova conducted a field work there. And if there is any interest, I would be happy to discuss it. And I plan to come to Fairbanks in, I hope, in October. So if it's possible to meet with anyone who is interested in my research in our projects, I would be happy to discuss the possibilities of collaboration. So, and as in my this current project, we hope to have results that will be not only scientifically relevant, but also important for communities. We want to create something that is more applicable and more relevant for the concerns of communities.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Vera. Just a question here for Jeff, but I think it's a larger question to the larger audience. If the community of Tanana has been polled since that road was constructed. That's pretty Alaska-centric, so I'll leave that up to the audience here to answer if anyone has an answer for that. But beyond that, thank you, Vera. We welcome you to Fairbanks. We have an ARCUS office here, and we'd love to see you if there's a chance to do that. But for now, we're going to go ahead and move to wrapping things up. And before folks go, we just have a couple quick things to go over. On behalf of ARCUS, I really want to thank you for joining us today, and special thanks to our speaker, Vera Kuklina, for her excellent presentation. We're continually working to improve our seminar series, as well as looking for suggestions for future seminar topics and speakers. If you could please take a minute or two to complete our short survey, A link to that is available now in the chat window. We would certainly appreciate that. A recording of today's webinar will be archived and available on the ARCUS Seminar Series webpage, and an email containing links to both survey and the archived webinar will be sent once the video recorded has been posted online. And we invite you to join our upcoming webinar on Wednesday, October 4th at 9 a.m. Henry Huntington with the Ocean Conservancy will present effects of Arctic commercial shipping on environments and communities, context, governance, priorities, and registration will be available online soon. So please visit the ARCUS homepage for more information about ARCUS, our programs, and upcoming Arctic-related events. And thank you for joining us.